Hi everyone, and welcome to Watercolors with Jaylene. And today's tutorial is going to be a fun and easy landscape or skyscape. And before we get started, I would like to ask you to go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. And if you could like my videos, I would greatly appreciate that as well. So to get started real quick, let's go over the supplies list or the materials list. And we will start with a piece of watercolor paper. I'm going to be using my number 6 round brush. I have some clean water, and then today I'm using my Grumbacher paints that I can't really call it a paint set because I put them in individually. So the colors that we'll be using, it's real easy. There's just 4 colors, and they are from the Grumbacher series. And it's permanent rose, cadmium orange, and then turquoise and indigo on the bottom. And then we will be using a Sharpie marker for the black. And then I do have a white gel pen that I use for all of the windows. If you want to go ahead and use like maybe a white paint, that probably would work also. And for that, you obviously would have to use more of a, probably like a acrylic paint. So to get started, let's move this aside. And here's our piece of paper. So what we're going to want to do is for the top part, the sky part, it's going to be not directly in the center of the paper. It's going to be a little bit below that. So I'm going to want, oh, and then I also have my paper towel for blotting my brush. Okay, so I do want to go ahead and just wet the top part. This is going to be a wet on wet for both the top and the bottom part, just so that the colors blend very nicely together to give us that beautiful sky, I guess sunset. We'll go with sunset, sunrise, depending on where you're located. It could be either. Okay, so we'll start with our cadmium orange, and we're going to put quite a bit on the brush. Let's get that loaded up. And so we just want to go across the top, and like I said, we want quite a bit on our brush because, as we all know, watercolor paints do lighten a little bit as they dry. And we want it to be a pretty bright color. Okay, so we have that, and now let's get some of the permanent rose on here. And we'll do start a little low, and then we can always work our way up into the orange and just let those kind of blend together naturally. So as these are blending, here we'll kind of do a couple swipes back and forth. All right, so we have those, and they will blend a little bit more as time goes on. They'll blend. So for the bottom portion, I'm going to start out with the turquoise and just do the entire bottom. And get quite a bit on my brush. So when I'm doing this, I don't want to touch the permanent rose color. Whoops, I forgot to, and that's okay. I forgot to go ahead and just wet this down here. So if you do forget, now I would suggest doing it the same as I did on the upper portion, and you know, just make the whole area wet to begin with. Okay, and of course that's what I forgot. So we'll come down here and get this nice bright turquoise over the entire thing, the entire water portion. And then while that's still wet, we can go ahead and grab some of the indigo, which is very dark. And I load up my brush, but I'm just going to do, you know, one swipe across back and forth like that. Okay, so then we're going to want to let that dry. We're going to want all of it to dry really well, so that when we do, because the next step is going to be putting the buildings in, so we do want everything to be nice and dry when we do that, because that will be with a Sharpie marker. So we'll give this just a minute to get dry. And while that's drying, I wanted to make a couple of suggestions on this. If you live on a waterfront and you have a beautiful evening skyline of the city, you could always paint yours, or if there is a friend of yours that lives on a waterfront. And most cities have one building that is very specific. So, you know, you could always pick that one building and just kind of draw in the shape of that particular building. And then it sets the tone for the whole thing. And the other buildings can just be a little more random. So that's a thought when you're doing this. Now, when I did this one, there was no city in mind. I just put in some buildings and then, of course, a little window. So that's just a random, it's no specific city. And so we're going to give this just another minute or so to dry, and then we can get started on the buildings. Okay, so we've given this a few minutes to dry, and I think now we're ready to go ahead and start creating our skyline. And so let me just move my paints out of the way. And also, I did want to mention that I will have down in the description a list of all of the supplies that I've used today, and the colors of the paints as well will be in there, so that you can refer to that if you want. So to get started on the skyline, you can just kind of go through and create, you know, draw in buildings. You can create anything, or like I had mentioned earlier, you know, if there is a specific city skyline that would be of interest to you, it'd be a lot of fun to do that. And you want to, of course, make these all different heights, add some real character to it. And that one building I had put in, I kind of liked that. And I actually had done that kind of by mistake, but I like the way it turned out, so. Okay, so there is just an outline of the skyline. And then real quick, you just go through with your marker and color all of the buildings in. Whoops. And this is, at this point, if you kind of made, you know, a line that isn't perfectly straight and you wanted to kind of fix it up, this is the time to do it, like right there. And then if you want buildings like this one I did put in with a little bit of a slant, just to add some character. Now you could obviously go ahead and paint this in, you know, with black paint. It probably would take, you know, if you were using a watercolor black, it probably would take a couple of coats to get it a real solid shade of black and real uniform throughout the buildings. And that's why I decided just to use a marker and go ahead and color them in, because it's just much easier, you know, to get it all one shade. So while I'm going through and coloring this in, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my Patreon. I will have the instruction sheet and a little diagram of this on there. If you wanted to go over to my Patreon page, you could download it. And I'll have the description of the paints and everything on there as well. And Patreon, if you aren't familiar with it, it's a membership, a monthly membership. And every month I do add different instruction sheets, how-tos, downloadables, coloring sheets, all kinds of fun stuff is on there, and I'm always adding new stuff to it. And it's just an easy place to go, like if you like to paint but you don't care about drawing things, then you can go on there and download the traceables and go ahead and, you know, just trace them and paint them. And for my top tier, my top tier Patreons, every month they receive unique, or I should say original, watercolor. Typically every month they are several greeting cards that I paint. And I think on this one I'm going to do the same thing and just add a little character to that one. I liked it on that first one I did. So they receive greeting cards every month, or some type of piece of art, and they all absolutely love it. And of course I do seasonal things, you know, at the holidays or what have you. So what I'm doing here is I'm just drawing in the baseline so that we hide the water line. We don't want any white showing there, and we do want it to be relatively straight. So then at this point you can just go through and color all of this in. This is just a fun little skyline to do. And now I'm using one of the fine point Sharpies. If you have a thicker one, you may want to use that. Would probably go a little quicker, depending on how big of a piece of paper you're using. You know, this is a relatively small piece. I want to say this one is measuring about 4 by 5 inches. I like to kind of keep them small for these videos if I can, just so that the videos themselves aren't too long. I don't want you to get bored listening to me babble on while I'm painting and drawing. But yet I want you to still, you know, be able to take away something. Alright, so we do have this pretty well colored in, and we don't want any little spots showing. Okay, so now that we have that completed, I'm going to take my white gel pen and just kind of pencil in some of the windows. I think that one I'll leave all dark. It's just a small little building. And of course, you know how not every window has lights on at night or in the morning or whenever this is. So we can leave some little gaps. Or the people that are sleeping in, or the office that isn't open. And I think we'll bring this down. Alright, so this building you can see is pretty busy. Okay, so then in this one, we'll do 2 there, 1 there, 2, and 2. See how this is coming alive? All right, and then I'm going to leave that one all dark just because it's so small. And on this one, I will do couple of slanted lights to go with the shape of the building. This one we can put a couple little ones in here, I think. And then over on this final building, all right. So that is it. It's just that quick, that simple. And it's a lot of fun, and it's really fun, as I had mentioned earlier, when you have a skyline in mind and you can put that one building in that's going to define it and everyone would recognize it. So, so that is it for today for this quick little video. And again, I just wanted to remind you to go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Like my videos, I would greatly appreciate it. It helps my channel grow. And until next time, ciao for now.